Hello, hello, all those beautiful faces. My name is Stephanie Edmonds. Welcome to Teaching Liberty. To live free, you have to think free. And that is exactly what we do here on this show. And tonight I have with me CT169 Strong, Alexis, and Maria. 2 nights in a row, I'm actually having a podcast with people who I've met in real life, doing real things on the ground. And then I'm like, hey, come on my podcast and talk about what you're doing. And what you do is housing advocacy, like super grassroots and super effective. So I'm really happy to have you guys back on, because it was about a year ago you were on here talking about the last legislative session, and we are going strong in the current legislative session, which we're going to get into. But kind of first, I just want to start with like generally what you guys are doing, because I think it is a great example for anybody anywhere over the country who's like looking to see like, what can I do, how can I take action, and really whether it's in housing or in something else, you have a great model going. So just talk about CT169 for me, who you guys are, and why you're doing this.
Sure. I'll start. About 4 years ago or so, a group of us around the state started. Some of them were lawmakers, some of them were regular citizens like Maria and myself, but we're also involved in our communities, began to notice a trend in Hartford that a lot of legislation relative to zoning and housing was beginning to chip away at our local control. And local control in Connecticut is important to us. We have 169 towns. We don't have regional government. And we believe that zoning should be in charge by local stewards, people who people who you've elected in some cases. And some of these bills that we've seen are actually being sponsored by more developer interests, I would say, in the name of affordable housing, in the name of a great housing shortage that we're seeing. We're just everyday citizens. We're volunteers. Some of us serve, like I said, on boards and commissions. And it was really hard to, as Marie would say, it's hard to unsee what we've seen. We've seen really how things are created in Hartford. It's ugly. It's not for the faint of heart. And it has taken a lot of work to dissect all these bills, because we don't get them sometimes until like late in the afternoon, and we have to dissect them really quickly to get them out to our constituents, to people.
And you guys
who are
have
really
nothing else
to
do. Like, you definitely don't have like, jobs or families or that kind of thing. So
Of course not. Yeah.
oh, well, you guys are doing amazing work. I appreciate it. Maria, go ahead and introduce yourself and talk a little bit more about what you guys are doing.
Sure. So, and I sort of came to this as a realtor. So it's something that I've been tracking a lot in the last, couple of cycles, and how the market has changed over time. And I just became very interested in these bills and what was happening. And I didn't really understand what that they were trying to do. So, we just made a point of getting informed and making sure that the residents of our state know, because that's the biggest issue here, is that the press is not talking about what is being discussed. So residents are going to work, living their lives, and they have no idea of the sort of onerous legislation that's being proposed that can really impact their homes, their lives, and the future of where they live. So that's what really motivates us. And that's why we do what we do, because we think everyone should know what's in those bills. We think everyone's voice is so critical to making sure. So if you know what's in the bill, you should be able to testify on it. So we make sure we give all of that information. And we learned on the job, right? On our non-paying job, we learned how to do all these things to make sure that people knew how to click links to testify, how to read the bills, how to understand what was in there. And we give little cheat sheets to explain what's in there. And that's what we did. So we've done that, and we focused on housing, but we think that there is such a need in Connecticut, but truly anywhere, to understand what's happening in a lot of different areas, whether it's education, whether it's, elections, anything that's being done by government. So I would love to see this model spread, statewide for sure, in the different, parts of legislature, but also across the state too.
Yeah, and you can see the website. Oh, I was just going to plug your website here real quick, ct169strong.org. I have it linked in the
Please do
description
that.
down
Thanks,
below.
Stephanie.
You can see just though it's like a pretty simple website here. They've got the bills listed. They've got some buttons that you can take action, and then you can dive in and go more deeply here. But it just goes to show that it doesn't take a lot. You know, you can just pull up a basic website template, you know, fill it in with your information, and it looks great. And it makes it really accessible for people. So ct169strong.org, I have that linked in the description down below. And like she said, whether it's housing or something else, like this is just sort of a template that you could use, and you would just put in like your niche, like your category of bills that you're looking at. So go ahead, Alexis, you were gonna keep going.
Yeah, I was just going to say, you know, I came to this, you know, Maria is a realtor and a finance person. I came to this as a neighborhood advocate and an environmentalist because land is inherently local. It's unlike any other commodity that we have because you can't make more of it. You can't move it. It is local. And the decisions that you make on land is permanent. You can't go back and really change it. And we believe the proper stewards of our land are our local commissioners. So I would just say, you know, yeah, go ahead, Stephanie. I feel like you're about to ask me a question.
Yeah, no, well, I was going to say, I think that's great because, you know, I want to talk specifically about some of the Connecticut stuff here, but I know a lot of the people that listen to this aren't necessarily in Connecticut. So I wanted to talk a little bit more broadly first. And that point you were saying it applies to anybody in any state, right? You were saying you, as the person who lives on the land, the people who live in the town, you're the stewards of that land. And once you make those decisions, they are permanent. And whether it's affordable housing, whether it's zoning, whether it's the housing crisis, these are narratives that are being used all around the country to then take action at your state and local levels to shape and change the way that your land is used. And so I just wanted to know, generally speaking, how can we dispel some of these myths that it's like, oh, well, there's a housing crisis, so we need government to step in and encourage people to build more things, or there's a affordability crisis, right? So we need government to step in and do something, or it's zoning that's the problem. So if government can just, you know, get the zoning just right, then all of the problems will go away. Like, I mean, what is the underlying sort of fallacy of these arguments?
Well, I think there's a couple things. I think the idea that zoning is the root evil of all of this, that's what's done it. I mean, I know we're talking generally nationwide, but if you look at it, I can't see that in Connecticut our zoning laws changed significantly that led to the '05 glut of development that occurred. It also wasn't zoning. So it wasn't restrictive, and it didn't prevent all that development that occurred in Connecticut. And then when the Great Recession happened and we had all of the crisis, then you see that there were so many people who were impacted by it. And then there was such a glut in inventory, and especially more so Connecticut than I think a lot of the rest of the country. We never recovered because there were other policies that were in place that made it so expensive to be in Connecticut, and it made a lot of people decide to leave our state. And I think we've seen that in a lot of northeastern states, especially. And I think that that's something, again, that's not the fault of zoning. So, you know, so again, that whole idea that all of a sudden it took a global pandemic to clear inventory nationwide because there was so much inventory that had to be absorbed, and a lot of people had done spec building. So when they lost money, or when they got out of the industry, or when they decided to not build in the same way, all of a sudden there was a need that was starting to, a demand that was starting to need that occurred. And now that's sort of where we are, is where you do need some additional housing, but you have to be careful, and you don't have to overcompensate for that. And over involvement of the government by neutering communities and neutering local laws is really a dangerous move to, and this, we'll talk about this one term, is as of right development, which is the big thing that they're trying to do with zoning, which means you don't have your local boards and commissions review for all of those issues that they normally look at, whether it's inland wetlands, whether it's, you know, health and safety and different things. They want to override these rules because they want developers to build as much and as dense as they want and as quickly as they want. And that may not be the solution that we need. So, I think that we have to be very judicious in how we do things, and we don't want to overreact, and we don't want the government to overreact and create too much legislation to then, create a next crisis. So we should be judicious about that.
Yeah.
Oh, we can't hear you.
I didn't want to cough into the mic, and then I left it on mute. I said, Alexis, did you have anything you wanted to add to that point?
No, I think that is absolutely spot on. I think what we've observed, just being part of the legislative process, if you will, in the last 4 years, is that there's a lot of blame on towns, on suburbs, of not doing enough when it comes to building affordable housing units. And I beg to differ. Just for your audience, in case they don't know, there's a law in Connecticut, 830G, that says that every town in Connecticut has to have 10% of their housing stock deemed affordable. So that there's a law, 830G, a builder's remedy, if you will, that lets developers bypass local zoning laws that you and I would have to adhere to, as long as they build 30% of those units in that apartment building as affordable. And they just have to be deed restricted for about 40 years.
And I know for a fact they're doing this all over the country, right? It might not be called 830G. I'm sure it's called something else, but they are doing this using affordable housing all over the country. And they're like, well, if we don't build this, then we're going to get sued and this and that because it's racist and all, but yes, go ahead. It's not just here in Connecticut. This is a national phenomenon.
Yeah, and the trouble, one of the issues is that with 830G is, as many affordable units you're adding, you're also adding a lot of market rate units. So your numbers really never look like you're really adding a whole lot of affordable units. So, someone will say, well, you're not really adding that much. So what are you doing in Fairfield? I'm using Fairfield as an example because I live there. But I just know, speaking for my own town and community, we do a lot. We've had, inclusionary zoning. We've had an affordable housing trust fund. I think we've been very proactive on this, and it's something that we do take seriously. So I think we want more collaboration, not that blame game. I call it SIMBY, collaboration in my backyard, instead of NIMBY, because that's what we want. We want to work with the state. We want to work with people to create affordable housing that helps people, certainly. And we don't think the bills that we've seen really help the people that need it. It's really just about density, dense market rate apartments.
Right. Yeah. So let's talk about some of these bills. And actually, before we get to the specific bills, you had talked a little bit about how these special interest groups seem to be cropping up. And they seem to be sort of front groups for actually the developers, and then other people in government or in, positions of power that are sort of in on it. There seems to be some deal making that's going on here. And I would assume that there's very similar things going on in other states. I mean, we see this type of industry capture at the federal level and all different sorts of industries too. So just tell me a little bit more about this dynamic here and how you are taking these big, powerful forces on.
Well, I think, if you look at it from we could just take one example. So there's an organization in Connecticut called Melville Trust, and they spend millions of dollars annually, and they give to nationwide organizations to help homelessness, or to different groups, to different nonprofits, to groups that push a certain narrative. And in their description, they actually list out, to their credit, they list out everything that they're spending money on. And in their goal, it says to change political and public will. Now, and that's very clear, right? So, and if you look at it, they fund certain national organizations, and these national organizations put out all this information on a statewide basis. So you're right, it is a national issue where there are these orgs, these nonprofits that are being funded to put out a message, and then all of these other smaller orgs within each of these different states can then go and say, oh, look at this chart on this national page, and this is where we're pulling our information, how we know. that there is these issues and that there is a housing crisis and there is X% that's required. And sometimes it's even the state who pays for these studies, and it's studies that are then done by a company that's backed, that where one of their founders is part of Regional Plan Association, which is also a developer backed organization in New York that led to the gentrification of a lot of New York and the elimination of a lot of middle class areas and working class areas. And so you see that this is now a move to now move it out of New York and into elsewhere. And so that's what's coming to Connecticut as well. And these things are everywhere. So it really is, you can turn around and find these groups everywhere. And you have funding that comes from state organizations. You've got them funding. Not only do they fund these nonprofits, they also fund newspapers. They fund NPR. They fund Connecticut Public Television. They fund, local newspapers to write narratives. It's unbelievable. So it's the lived experience. It's the narrative writing. So it's all about the heartfelt response. And it's not always considering the reality of what are the real factors that may have led to the things that have occurred.
Right.
Right.
But it sounds good. It sounds good. And it sounds like something you'd want to support, right? Like,
yes,
I want to be inclusive. I want to make sure that, things are affordable. Like, I don't want there to be a housing crisis. And you're right. They use these narratives and you're like, oh, well, that's awful. Like, we need to do something to help them. Like, government, do something. So they just totally manufacture our consent. And it is at so many different levels from so many different sides. And you might not even know it, right? Mm-hmm. You're just being a good person going about your life.
And then you look at studies, and then the other example we have is where they'll hire someone to do a study. So they hired a group to do a study and just to evaluate segregation in Connecticut. And they only spoke to the largest housing authorities in Connecticut, and they only spoke to the developers, and they only spoke to the housing advocates. What kind of answers are you going to get? You're going to get answers that are predetermined, that you already knew what you were going to get. So, not talking to the local towns, communities of different sizes, let leaders in the local communities, specialists, land use specialists, things like that would have been very meaningful and really kind of targeted to true solutions are the things that we refuse to do because they want to push a narrative. And because they're focused on its zoning. It's not about any of these other issues. It's not about fixing the economy. It's not about making, things. One of the things that we look at in Connecticut is that we have the third highest energy costs in the entire country. And we also have the second highest property taxes. So when you say that there is a housing crisis and there are so many people who are paying more than 30% of their income towards housing costs, it's understandable. And I think many people right now in this inflationary environment are trapped in that situation as well. And it's unfortunate. But part of the situation is when you cannot fix these other things that happen from the state that are unfunded mandates, and you're not doing sound energy policy that makes sure that you can provide the energy you need and it's at an affordable rate, this is where you end up. So these are sort of examples of problems that exist and that they're not being addressed in the right way, and it's not being done in a collaborative way with throughout the state, and that's what really needs to change.
Yes, yeah, but the developers. Oh no, I was just going to say the developers get to make more money. The legislators get to have more power. It's a great deal for them. But go ahead, Alexis. What were you going to say?
Yeah, I was just going to add, we talk about these groups and, there are many groups. And I think I came into this 4 years ago very naive. I was just a citizen. If I went up to Hartford and I read my testimony, I thought, gosh, I would be listened to by my representatives, by the folks on the committee. But I just realized, and I should have known better, I was a political science major, they're lobbyists, and these housing advocates spend, six figures, if not more, to provide marketing materials, to have, folks up there testifying, paying college students to testify for these, on behalf of on the bills. And it's been very interesting to see that. So we actually at CT 1629, we've actually hired a part-time lobbyists to help us to have some boots on the ground up there, because it was hard to connect with our legislators, to be perfectly honest with you. I think the average citizen would be really shocked about how the system works. So we've been fortunate to get small donations from people, and we've been able to hire a part-time lobbyist so we can have those boots on the ground.
Play with the big boys. Okay. I thought you were going to say you've been paying a bunch of college students to go to make testimonies for you.
No, we think it's probably not that effective to have a college student get a text message of what they should read out loud, because when the legislator asks them a question and they have to go back and actually understand what they read, it's not a really good look.
All right, so let's talk specifically about the legislative session that we have going on currently here in Connecticut. I know last year there was a whole bunch of stuff, and I encourage people to go back and check out our episodes to see what was going on then. I mean, maybe you can give us a little recap, because I know some of the stuff then gets carried over whatever they don't get done. So give us a little update on where we are, what's going on, and what we should be expecting.
So I think we have a couple of really bad bills. One of them is SB 207. It's a housing authority jurisdiction bill. And that would allow a housing authority from any municipality to expand their area of operation into another town without the other town's permission. And so that's one of the bills where, if you want to collaborate, if you don't have the technology and the experience, that's perfectly fine. Go ahead. But if you do, then you shouldn't have to be imposed upon by another community who wants to just build in your town. So that's one.
I don't even understand that. I don't, like, how can they just be like, we're just gonna build here? Like, it's your town. We know there's that little thing called like the border, but we're just not into borders these days, I guess. Right here,
unaccountable people having people build in your community who are unaccountable to your local residents, and then we've got a situation where we have cities like New Haven, who have a huge amount of vouchers. And so they have so many vouchers and they say they can't use them. So they said, okay, well, we're going to go build elsewhere so we can use our vouchers in your town. And so, our thought is, why are you not giving the vouchers to the towns more equitably? Wouldn't that make more sense?
Right. What does New Haven get out of having the vouchers? Like, do they make so much money off of each voucher or something?
Follow the money. So I think at least 10% of a voucher ends up going as overhead to the housing authority. So, we're talking about hundreds of millions that's going to New Haven Housing Authority right now in voucher, money. So it is an astounding number. And it's interesting if you think about that. And there's one of the graphics that's on our website. There was that little pie chart that you pulled up before. And what that essentially shows you is that 19 towns get 85% of the vouchers, and the other 150 towns share 15% of the vouchers. So it's such a tiny, so one town will have 33 vouchers and they have 7,500. So it's astronomical, the inequity that's going on there. So that's one of them. Another bill that's really bad is they want to have to eliminate local municipal design review. And in states with beautiful historic buildings and things like that, it's a real concern for our communities. I mean, that's I think what draws a lot of people to Connecticut, our state, is just the beauty of it. And the idea that, if 830G, as we talked about, can override design review, but it would require you to build 30% affordable. So what we see in a lot of these bills pushed by developers is we just want to override these rules, and we just don't want to build affordable while we're doing it. So it's the irony of they pretend to be for affordability and for the average common person, but they really aren't. It's all about lining the developers' pockets and making sure it costs them less to build. So that's another bad bill. And then another one is they want to have church properties to be allowed as of right to build up to 8 homeless shelters without sewer, sanitation, without kitchens, without running water. And we wonder, it's, and so no health and safety review by your local community. And we've read, I mean, you can Google nationwide, there's issues with these shelters and the sort of litigation and going to court over different issues that's happening on, everywhere with these things. And I think it's not humane. It's not,
Yeah.
it
Well,
doesn't
I
dignity.
think it's not fair to the taxpayers because, I mean, there was somebody who I know who was making like a more pure libertarian argument. They're like, well, churches should be able to do like whatever they want with their property. And I'm like, all right, like if we were operating in a pure free market society, like, okay, but we're not. When you start bringing in people to live in homeless shelters, they're going to then take advantage of other social services that the taxpayers provide, right? So it's not just, oh, like churches should be able to do what they want with their property. There's so many other things that would become then a burden on the taxpayers. And again, it's not, I know there's a lot of people out there who need services, who need these other things, but it's not a humane way to provide it by essentially forcing these unfunded things onto towns.
And where does your property rights begin and my property rights end, right? So you want the church to be, but what about the other neighboring homes and the light and noise and all of the other things that could be impacted by a different use that's not what you bargained for when you purchased your home, or where you live. So it's concerning. So that's another one. Then there's again, it's really that as of right development that we're seeing a lot. There's as of right, they want to convert industrial buildings and commercial buildings into residential as of right. Again, no review. You have concerns with potential environmental issues, with possible industry usage that had happened in the past that no one's now having proper oversight of. And also the idea that you have a mix in all of these communities of your industrial base, your commercial base, and your residential. And so if you're eliminating your commercial and your industrial base, your future burdens are going to be much higher on your residential property owners. And that's a really a steep thing. And again, you're just then going to increase property taxes. And so you have to really look at the unintended or fully recognizable consequences. And I think many times everybody's got blinders on and like just build and no real consideration of what these actually mean in the long run, because you want to have economic viability, because the only way you truly improve affordability anywhere is by turning the economics around and having growth and having salaries increase and better job opportunities. And that's really the challenge in all of this. And that's, I think, a national issue right now, is that we've seen such high inflation in property values and in rental costs and everything, but the salaries are what has not kept up with it.
Yeah, and I would just add, we're talking about this notion of as of right. We've seen it all over these bills, and so that means that it's already in the zoning regulations. So it doesn't need a public hearing. And I'm a zoning commissioner in my community, and I would say when people come to speak in favor or against a certain application or project, they really provide very critical, valuable information about the land, because they know it best. They know traffic patterns. They know when little kids are crossing the street to go to school. And getting rid of divorcing the public from zoning and from decision making is just not good policy, and that's not something that we want to create in Connecticut. So we're the Constitution state, for Pete's sake, and so as of right is just cropping up. I haven't seen it. We've just seen it so many times this year. It's very interesting.
Yeah, I want to look more into this term and what it's being used for, because it seems like it's being inverted, right? Like whose rights, what's the government's role here and who has rights and who gives us our rights? Like, I think we need to sort some things out here and get back to some basics. Yeah. And I just can't help but to think of how this is just central planning, right? This is the state is doing central planning. And I mean, I taught some history courses in my day. I was known to do that at one point. And, that was the definition we gave of communism, You know, like, it's supposed to be America. It's supposed to be, you know, democracy, freedom, capitalism. And the government's out here just telling us like how much our houses should cost and how many houses we should build or shouldn't build and where they should be built and who gets to build them and who doesn't get to build them. It seems insane.
Yeah. And then there's another bill. I mean, Desegregate Connecticut has been around for a number of years here, and their bill is back yet again, and they're trying to mandate, you know, so it's an opt-in, they say, but if you don't opt in, then you're deprioritized for certain funding resources. So, you know, it's the stick always. They
Bill called?
What's that? I'm sorry. Oh, it's called it's HB 5390, and it's Desegregate Connecticut's transit-oriented communities. And what they're doing is mandating, again, as of right development. So you have to set up a transit area, which we're all for transit development. And there exists last year a bill that passed that was a good bill was MRDA, MRDA, Municipal Redevelopment Authority, and so that helps people to different municipalities to decide if they want to do a development and they need some funding for some resources around their transit area, they can request funding resources. But now this is going to take it to a different level, and they want to start another funding source, but then they're going to mandate as of right middle housing development. So anything up to 9 units as of right within this transit area, you know, and again, no consideration of whether your local infrastructure can handle that much development and that much density everywhere, because you can't then control what's being done up to 9 units in each lot. And then on A30G, they want to take away the review, which is the only review you can have is health and safety. And so again, they want to take away health and safety review. And then churches and nonprofits can build as of right as well. And again, it's just the idea that you're just deprioritizing certain groups, certain towns, and you're forcing this quick development that, again, can be very overwhelming to the infrastructure of a community. And as we've said, it's those local stewards who are the ones who are going to make sure that you're not overwhelming infrastructure, that there's no traffic hazards, that are all those other little factors that come into play in planning and zoning that you want to make sure to keep and protect your environment and your community.
Yeah. And so what can people do?
And I think we have to remember, you know, sorry,
I think there might be a little delay or something between us. I'm sorry. I was just gonna. Did you want to add something on to that? Okay, because I was gonna say.
No, just really quickly.
You know.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Add on.
Yeah, really quickly. Sorry about the delay. Maybe it's on my end. I would just say, you know, remind people that land use controls and zoning, they're more than just affordable housing. Land use controls and zoning are really about balanced growth and development in our communities. They prevent congestion. They protect property values. They recognize, and we recognize that here in Connecticut. And I think we are an aspirational society where we have towns that are more than, you know, able to determine our own community needs and goals. So I would just want to leave that with your audience.
And we're accountable. So those who are locally elected are, you know, easily removed from office if they're not doing right by their residents. And so these are the people you see in your grocery store and the people you see in your streets and in your schools, and they'll let you know what they're thinking about what's happening in your community. And that's the best check and balance you have. And I think that's unfortunately what's happening now at the state level is it's leaders and legislators that aren't focused on the issues that matter most to the communities that they represent. And that's what's really sad to me is, you know, there's been a lot of focus on the larger cities and they wield a lot of power, and these smaller communities are getting marginalized, and that's the unfortunate thing here.
Yeah. So what can people do to take action, right? Because it is unfortunate, and it does seem like, you know, we're on sort of the losing side, but there are ways we can take action, because I've seen over the past 2 years that I've been paying attention and seeing what you've been doing, that you have had a lot of impact whether it's in stopping bills, whether it's in significantly changing the language of bills, whether it's getting them sort of dumbed down to studies, which like studies aren't great, but you know, it's like not the thing that they wanted it to be. So what can people be doing right now? Obviously go to your website, but I imagine the bills are at different places, like, you know, whether there's public comment or whether they should just be emailing their reps. You know, tell me what people should be doing.
So right now
Absolutely.
we're out of committee on all the bills. So some of the bills, so there are bills that are dead. Well, we'll say that those bill numbers are dead, but the concepts never really die, because we have things like dummy bills as well, which are blank slate. They just pass a bill that means nothing, and then they can put 100 pages of language in it at 2 a.m. on a Saturday morning, let's say, and have something onerous in there. So one never knows what one we will see at the end of the last week of session is when those are ripe to come out. But
and that's the official term. I had to look it up, and it's actually on the General Connecticut website of glossary of terms, dummy bill. I'm like, I was dumbfounded. You could say.
Yeah, 4 of them. Yeah, it's unbelievable. Crazy. So what we recommend right now is it's a little bit of a lull right now, but in the next week, we're going to start seeing it start to ratchet up. They're going to start calling bills to the floor. And that's when it's going to really be critical for people to pay attention. So if you follow us, if you're in Connecticut and you follow us on Facebook, we'll let you know when we know, which is always usually last minute, last 24 hours. But we let people know when bills are going to go to the floor, when you need to send petitions and email your representative, email the governor. And we'll have quick links. We're working on setting up the quick link with all of the bills of concern. So you can send that to your legislators, and we will have call outs, we'll have responses, we'll ask people to call their legislators to let them know. We'll be up in Hartford too at some point during the session as it gets closer. And so it's all out, just making sure that we get better language in the bills. We collaborate with everybody that we can. We form alliances where we can, and hope to stop the bad bills and get some good ones passed so we can get some real good changes made up in Hartford.
Yeah, and I know you said Facebook. I'm more of like a Twitter kind of person, and I know you guys are on fire over there. So I imagine all the stuff you're posting over there is very similar to what you find over here. So like they said, I guess in the next week, these bills are going to start coming up to the floor. And what you need people to do would be to, like you said, fill out those petitions. But then would there also be those opportunities to make public comment? Is that what these are as well?
No, that portion is unfortunately over.
That's only when they're in the in the committee. So now they're going to go out to the main floor, so you can fill out the petitions. You can call your representatives directly. You can go up there. I'd love to go up. Like, let me know what day you're going up there. Maybe we could do like, some like on the ground coverage of it. If there's any like good politicians that we should like go and chase with the camera and like ask them questions, you can like point them out to me and tell me what questions to ask them. Those are always like really good videos. I have some good ones from when I was up at the state capitol in New York, in Albany, and I got into the elevator with this guy Dinowitz, who's like a big pharma shill. Like, he puts out all the most horrible bills about like how the state can do any like pharmaceutical intervention that they want to your kids and stuff. And so I got in the elevator with him with my camera, and I like asked him all like these questions, and he like ran away from me when he finally got up. I would love to do that to some Connecticut lawmakers about housing or whatever the deal is. So
yeah.
Awesome. All right. So
people again.
What was that? Sorry.
It's an election year. It's an election year. I'm sorry about this delay.
Oh, it's an election year. Okay, yes. Talk about it.
And we just have to remember, our legislators do work for us. And do not be shy about emailing them, contacting them. When you run into them at, the Cub Scouts event, ask them, what do they think about the zoning bills? And get their feedback.
Absolutely. And we keep track, and unfortunately, there is an imbalance here in Connecticut. So it's 2/3 Democrat, 1/3 Republican. So if they want to pass something, they can. And it really does matter, but when there's a lot of public outcry, because these issues are not a Democrat or Republican issue. It's unfortunate that it's really one side that's pushing these agenda items, but really, the public is not that way. We have supporters on both sides of the aisle who all agree that these are not good. It's just not good policy. There are plenty of great people on both sides who are very advocate strong about this and really make wonderful points on how this should not happen, and that we really need to maintain local control, and they just, it's unfortunate, but this is the best way to do it, is to really let them know, and especially the Democrats, because when they know that Democrats are not happy, then they really listen. So it's good.
Yeah. And I am a Democrat. I'm registered as a Democrat. I hang out with Democrats. I support Democratic candidates. And I can tell you that's true. And I, when I first started to like go and do things, I was a little nervous because I'm like, oh God, like I'm going to hang out with a bunch of Democrats. Like, like not that I like Republicans necessarily any better, but after COVID, I guess I was like a little like, because the Democrats were the ones who were running those policies. But when I was at the table, I was like, oh, you guys think taxes are too high? You guys actually you want your local police department endorsement. It's like the issues that we care about. It was exactly the same. It didn't matter whether it was Democrat or Republican. And same thing here, like down here in Stanford, we had the rat bill, which we talked about last year. Like Stanford is one of the major places that they're going super hard with the development, and they're taking like what was our, Stanford was a city, but it still has like that town feel, like a small, like kind of a small town feel at the same time. And it has a lot of little cute neighborhoods, but they're really just like trying to build up everywhere. And doesn't matter if you're the D or an R next to your name. People who live their whole lives here are just like, this is too much. And we don't have control. It's these outside people coming in, developers coming in, or people up at the state coming in. So thank you guys so much for what you do. I know I speak for a lot of people. I know because like whenever I mention your names and what you guys, oh yeah, like I love what they're doing. So I know your email list is growing. I encourage everybody, if you're not on it, to get on it, get involved. There's still time left in this legislative session to make a difference. Make sure you go to CT169. strong.org. Follow them on Facebook, follow them on X, follow them on Instagram. They're on all the platforms. Give them your support, give them your dollars. It goes directly to the good guys that are up in Hartford. And yeah, anything else before we get out of here? Anything else I didn't get?
That's it. Thank you.
All right. And for anybody out there, I know we have some people checking in live. Make sure you hit that like button. If you're just finding your way here, make sure you subscribe to the channel. This is a special live session. Usually I do these on Monday nights at 8:30 live, but make sure you got that notification bell tapped so that anytime we happen to go live, you'll know. And until next time, remember, think free, live free, and give all the glory to God.